Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Hail to the Pod. I'm Sebastian Rouzard. I'm here with my co-host Sam Chang. How's it going?
It's going good. Bright and sunny day outside. It's April, beginning of April, shockingly, but yeah,
It's getting
everything's
a
good.
lot warmer. It's getting a lot warmer.
Honestly, I think it was like what it felt like 70 degrees. Honestly, I never go
Oh,
outside.
oh,
Sometimes
dude,
because
it was. I went outside today early in the morning. It was like 45 degrees, and then by the time I got back here, it was 60.
45 in the morning.
Yeah.
All right. Uh, I guess this episode we're gonna take a look. Well, it's gonna talk about a little bit about democracy. Basically, like democracy in America and how we have defined it, I guess, how that sort of history changed in our country and where we are right now, and basically what we're doing in the future. Basically, where because today, a lot of kids, millennials and Gen Zers, I guess, are taking a very progressive stance and basically their platform, like our platform, I guess, is basically having a full-fledged sort of democratic system that is different from probably the way the founding fathers have thought of it. And all of these movements are like a testament to those ideas. And I guess this is like a very broad topic, I have to admit, but um, I guess we could start by um, what the founders thought of democracy and versus what we think of it now. So I think Sebastian, you know a lot about Greece and stuff because of your Latin class, and I think you
Yeah.
used to say philosophy class. So
Yeah.
well, let's take a look at the Greeks, right? What happened in Greece? What was democracy in Greece? Because that's the pinnacle of what democracy is.
Okay. So, based off of what we know in Athens, Greece, that was more or less considered where the first world democracy was founded by, I believe his name was Cleisthenes. Cleisthenes is also considered is also considered the father of democracy because he is believed to have also founded the world's first pure democracy. And I think there's a very uh, stark contrast between the Athenian democracy and a lot of the other democracies and representative governments we see today. Properly, as it is properly defined, a pure or direct democracy is power in the hands of the people, in which a nation's policies and other aspects of government are at the sole discretion of the people via majority vote. And that's basically what they had in Athens, particularly where, in order to choose elected officials, they basically just had anyone who was considered a citizen. Primarily at the time, men who served in the military were required, once they were eligible for citizenship, to become to form an assembly, and there they would choose their elected officials.
Well, based on what I've heard and what I know, that basically what we know of democracy today is basically what we got from the Greeks and the founding fathers, right?
Yeah.
Basically, they were very intelligent. They were born in the age of enlightenment, which, if anyone doesn't know, is basically this age in Europe and in America where people thought that how should I say this, that they should be search for reason. And what I mean by that is basically search for facts and knowledge. And this was this was like a counter um like a counter movement towards the like the Great Awakenings, which is basically a religious movement saying, "Oh, believe in God." Every like your mind has to be, I guess, filled with religion, filled with all these like religious teachings, and it's basically like a whole science versus religion thing. And basically, they also during that time meddled in with like philosophy that related with democracy. And what they thought of democracy is that based on what they've written and said, they didn't like democracy because they wanted this like balance between elitism and power to the people. And that kind of like is the reason why we had like this sort of like United States Senate where they were elected by state legislators instead of the people. And basically, they thought that pure democracies are bad because of mob rule. The majority will like even if it's like 51 to 49, will always overpower the minority. And though that majority will stay there for a long period of time, and that they would like shun the minority for however long, and that kind of creates it's kind of creates this sort of like paradox, right? In
Yeah.
which like the majority is like a king. They have all the power now. Even if it's like 51 people, like one person could make up that difference. And yeah, but like the reason why I'm like bringing this up, why we're bringing this up, because like there's like these movements in history in like the progressive era and especially today where we're deviating from that sort of philosophy from our founders, and we're going and we're like we want power, all the power to the people, or most of that power to the people. And basically in the progressive era, that's the 17th Amendment. Now it's basically all these movements um, basically undermining the government, or not really like totally undermining them, but kind of saying that, oh, politicians, they're not working for the people. So we, the people, have to go full fledged on them and all that. And I see like these things like in these like discussions and debates on like social media saying with like progressives saying, oh, we are a democracy and all that, but people are saying, no, we're a republic. We're different, kind of, in the case that this is not a pure thing. This is, we have a constitution that gives power to the people. Let's say, like under God, we have rights, but also there's a checks and balances over what the power of the establishment and the power of the people, kind of like creating this balance. And the one way, right,
Yeah.
um, that we're deviating from that is the electoral college and our proposition of proposing this national popular vote system that even if like a 51-49, 51, if a presidential candidate gets 51% of the vote, he becomes president. And that creates this like the electoral college is like created so that smaller states could get a vote, could get like some say. And that prevents like large cities to have like all the voting power, because if urban areas, if if we had a national popular vote system, then all those voters, right, in the urban areas would vote Democrat basically 9 out of 10 times, or 10 out of 10 times. And it's just we're going to talk about this soon. We're going to talk about whether this is the right way to go. So, like Seb, based on like what I've said, um, I mean, is a national popular vote system the way to go?
Quite frankly, no, it's not. And I'll tell you why. So personally, I think the founding fathers had it right when they chose not to have a pure democracy. At least during their time, it made sense because think about it this way: they're wealthy. Obviously, they just won a revolution against arguably one of the greatest superpowers in the world at that time in Great Britain, and it would make sense that they wouldn't want to have a pure democracy and get the average citizen more or less involved in government affairs, because what would you do if you had your average farmer who could barely read or write making government decisions? Your country, you would think that your country wouldn't last too long. So I think they had it right with, I think you could say in a sense we have more of a democratic republic in a sense where this nation is built both on more the principles of both a democracy and a republic. And I do think it's important that we do have um, elective representatives to, enforce a lot of the policies and initiatives that a lot of more common people and the average citizen are advocating for, or a lot of them want in a sense. I don't think it's the best idea to just put all that power or give all that responsibility to the average person, primarily because a lot of people, I'm not going to say all people, but a lot of people aren't keeping up to date, or they really aren't educated in terms of concerning or informed really a lot of the politics and a lot of the things that are going on in this nation. You wouldn't want them to just blindly follow um, one political party and one ideology without really understanding the other side, especially since it could also be to their detriment. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of people today. They end up listening to a politician who stands for values that they believe they would stem to benefit from, but at the end of the day it's to their detriment instead, because they're not really looking at their own, I guess you could say, financial situation or anything like that, or it's just out of their own personal bias. So
So, oh,
yeah,
sorry. So,
yeah. So
I have a question. So, do you think, and I'm just like gonna ask this, the 17th Amendment abolished the the rule that senators are elected by state legislators, making them less elite and more, I guess, like that abides, like they have to abide this direct election system. Do you think we should repeal that? I think this is like, because like I know I read an article saying, oh, we should repeal it. Um, like no, nothing like something around like the grounds of whether we should repeal it or not. So, do you think we should revive the founding fathers' vision and repeal that amendment?
uh, for me, it all depends. I can't give you a definitive answer. It for me, it all matters. It realistically, I think no, because when you look at the situation across the country and you look at a lot of the different states and towns and counties and whatnot, and you look at the demographic and the other and the specific groups of people who are living there. Obviously, in some areas in the country, some people might be more educated or more informed on a lot of the political and social matters, especially since they should yes, and those people in more educated areas would know what would be best for them, in terms of picking their local leaders or state leaders, whereas that might not be the case in other parts of the country. And some politicians might just, in a sense, take advantage of them. But overall, I don't think you should repeal it. I think there it could be in the hands of the people, but at the same time, I don't think when it comes to making national decisions for the country as a whole, regular people should have that power, that ability.
Yeah. So I asked this because like not only are these like these questions seem like trivial, but I think we should like ask them for the sake of like a thinking, because like thinking that's not like a lot of like a thing that we do a lot of in like every aspect but of our lives. But like nearly a year ago I kind of fondled with this idea, right, of
Yeah.
repealing the 17th Amendment. Like this is just me like thinking, because I usually like when I read something or when I hear something, I usually like overthink it and like go into the realm of of like imagination and just like think, what would happen if we did this? So basically, I kind of fondled with this idea of like repealing the 17th Amendment, right, and have instituting a new amendment, basically having senators or the upper house being elected by the state legislators, but they have to be um, like elected based on, I guess, education slowly, and even IQ. But that's like an iffy thing with IQ tests. It's just sometimes it's just so different. Like each there's a different test, but based on more morals and education, um, and all that. Like for example, um, I guess you could say, as far as like an example, as like an economics PhD like guy from, let's say, Yale, who knows a lot of like, who's been not only teaching but like researching and all this stuff, like advising all these big politicians and think tanks, being elected as chosen as a senator and basically running whatever committee, bank committee, uh, economics committee, or whatever committee they have, basically having all these educated minds, Nobel Prize winners, I don't know, um, doctors. I mean by the PhD sense, from any like top university, um, who are assessed and chosen. And th- I know, like at that time, I thought this was like a okay idea, but then this sounds very elitist, like very aristocratic, which is not, which is basically like a thing, like aristocracy and all that. It's not really part of um, our way of life. Uh, Thinking about it now, but it's like I kind of like I thought of that idea because honestly, like I don't want to. I'm trying to not become like a pessimistic person, but sometimes, most of the time, the people, like as a whole, majority of them don't. And I'm just saying what I thought of that time during that time. That the majority of people don't have good judgment, and I kind of still have that thought in my mind, right? Like as of right now, as of like late, um, because like most of the time, yeah, it goes back to the mob rule idea. It's like not a lot of people have good judgment. They're not educated enough, or they don't know something enough. And in truth, not a lot of people do. That's why we have to go and accumulate every fact, every single data point or whatever, to have like an educated opinion. But that's really my thought process, and that's thinking about it now. I talked to like this, like a teacher, private teacher, um, who like knows a lot more than me, of course, and he said basically that's really hard to like um, carry out. Not only would the people would reject that, like out like reject that immediately, but it's hard to assess No, it's not hard to assess. If it was like an IQ test, then it's hard to assess. But third, most people in politics do have degrees, do have who are educated, very educated, like Jeanette Yellen, um, U.S. Treasury Secretary, economics PhD at Yale, taught at Harvard and UC Berkeley. Uh, Also, a lot of experience. She was like chairwoman of the Federal Reserve and all these positions. But in the end, I know it doesn't work, but I guess it's fun to experiment all these ideas. And I think that people should really think about these like ideas and like learn about every single like opinion and viewpoint. But yeah, I'm getting sidetracked. But yeah,
I think no, I see where you're coming from though. It's because you've got a good point, because you would assume obviously that people who attend or who have attended these top universities are indeed, well educated, and they would make decisions that are in the best interests of the country, and propel us forward and allow us to keep up with a lot of other countries like China, Russia, our European allies, and you know places like Iran, North Korea, and the rest of them. But I see where, don't you think in a sense that also it could be a little biased, or people would also in a sense also take advantage of that system? Because obviously you'd want to have very well educated people obviously in these positions of power, but would they also use their knowledge and their prestige and the power they currently hold to, I don't know, in a sense, because you could say in a sense power corrupts people. Don't you think that, um,
like
especially,
oh yeah.
uh, yeah. So because you said, for example, the people in the upper house, for example, if they were chosen by the state legislatures, you were thinking,
Hmm.
yeah. So it's it's a good idea in the sense where you have these people who you would at first glance believe are qualified for the job to take these positions of power, but at the same time, you wouldn't want them to use the power that they are given to abuse or take advantage of other people. That's where the only real issue I see comes in.
Yeah, that's why like I don't know, like theoretically, like there should be like when I thought about this, there should have been like some sort of like testing, like an individual like candidate's morality, but it's like ridiculous. I like we can't really know if someone is like Abraham Lincoln moral in a sense because we know that Lincoln was very of a was a very like compassionate, empathetic, and this moral person because of historical records. Because we like as like people in the future who look back and look at these events, we assess like the trials that these people went through, and we say, oh, this person is like great because not only does he have like this moral complex, he's like compassionate and all that, and it's hard to assess. And this is very like too ideal. It only works in theory, and really, it doesn't really work. But uh, well, now I want to assure like everyone, like I don't have that viewpoint anymore. I am don't have that elitist viewpoint, but there's a lot of problems with it. With because state legislators, the reason why it was removed is because like special interest groups, like big businesses during that time, could really just you know, um, what's the word? Like bribe these politicians and say, hey, I'm going to give you this money and you have to do this. And basically, it does not work well with the people, and it's good. We should have read that amendment. I just brought it up because I had this like at one point in my life I had like a year ago or two. I just had this like idea in my mind. Um, but yeah, but I think there's this another proposal that kind of relates strongly with the power to the people, and that is lowering the voting age to like 16 years old. And that is like, I went on this like um, webinar, right?
Yeah.
It's sponsored by the High School Democrats of America. I think it was like in Orange County, New York. Uh, and I got it like some, I think, uh, girl posted it on her story, and she said, "Oh, there's this webinar." And I was like, "Okay, I'll join it to see what's up." And I did. It was like on a Thursday, 5 p.m., 6 p.m. And actually, the guest speaker was Andrew Yang. And like Andrew Yang, of all the people in modern politics, he's like one of few people, few politicians I come to respect and think would make a good New York City mayor. But but besides that, I went on this webinar, and one of the questions was asked was like, how many people in the chat want the voting age to be lowered to 16? And in my mind, during that time, I thought this is a really like an iffy thing. I like at one like I in one part of my mind, I want the voting age to be lowered because I really wanted to vote, and but the like the rest of my mind was like, what about like 16-year-olds? We are not really mature in the sense
Most
that like
definitely.
some of them are like mature who are like who act like they're like 30, and like most of them are like we try to act mature, but we fail dramatically. We drastically, we just screw everything up.
A
um,
lot.
yeah, like especially in our day and age, we're too emotional. But I was like thinking in my mind, like, there's a lot of like 16-year-olds who are like, you know, you're like, they're not like serious. And this goes for like in every school. They're not, they're like immature, and that's just an understatement. And the thought of them, thought of like most kids our age were factually immature, most of them. It's just like I was thinking of how that affects voting, right? And like because like in like no one takes student council elections seriously. I have to like be truthful in this. Everyone like thinks that, oh, it's like idealistically, it's like, oh, it's this like club where everyone like kids gets a voice who knows like the process of getting vote of like how voting works, who could like propose all these grand ideas, but in reality, all those ideas are just like shoved away by the administration. All these proposals of like microwaves in the cafeteria and what was it free lunch, free lunch, and or something like that. It's like ridiculous. Like it's just and no one votes seriously. Um,
Well,
no
you know,
one
I
votes.
I don't know what you'd expect, when you because it's very interesting because you're right. We're high school students. Not surprised. A lot of people in our generation are very immature, even when they are eligible or they are of voting age when we're 18. I still don't trust the majority of our generation to make the right decisions when voting. And like you said, nobody takes these seriously. It's you always have those you always have those few candidates that actually have good, genuine ideas that would improve the school. Some of them being very grandiose, and they could actually be beneficial. But like you said, the administration or school administration will either turn them away, and then everyone will usually just vote for the kid who comes up with a bunch of outrageous proposals. It's usually very well liked among the student body, and they'll vote for that person.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I,
It's there's some good, of course. There's always good. It's just a lot of like student government allows fundraising, high school prom, bake sale that basically like raises all this money and goes to like charities and all those organizations, which is good. But voting is basically a giant popularity contest, and most kids are like, "Oh, I'm gonna vote for whoever this athlete." But I think it's unfair to like compare that with an actual election.
yeah,
It's like actual elections are actual elections, and I know that a lot of kids our age are very serious about politics, like us. Um, so it's very unfair to like compare that, but I think and eventually in the future, since our kids are becoming more politically involved and I see that like there's a rapid like increase. I noticed from middle school, it's basically like this joke. From now, it's basically like um, people were joking about it. Now everyone's like very serious about this, like intensely serious, rightly so because of like multiple social justice issues. All this like also possibly economic, but I don't think a lot of kids are focused on the economy that much. But
yeah, they're more focused on unearthing a lot of I guess you could say, especially with the protests over the summer, they're more focused on unearthing a lot of the you know racial justice issues in the country.
yeah, but that's good. I'm not saying it's bad. Honestly, this shouldn't be downplayed. All this 2020, 2021, although this has been like a decades long thing, centuries, it's like it's an issue that should be addressed. And there shouldn't be any reservations about this. But of course, we have to think about this through, but we have to
Yeah,
like combat it with firmness. But going back, the voting age, this opens a door to a lot of potential voters. And back to the webinar. Um, I was the one with reservations about this, and me when like personally in political issues, I kind of um think on both sides. I think I try to be open minded and get like facts on this side, facts on the other side, and kind of that results into this me like I'm in a standstill. I don't know what to oh I believe in this, but also in that, also like that thing I need to consider. But everyone else in like the chat, I think there were like 29 other people. They were like, "Yes, let's do it. Yes!" Exclamation marks. Let's go. I want this. Um, it's like, oh wow, there's a lot of people who agree with this. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I guess so. We want to vote. Voting is exciting. But honestly, I think for now it's a I don't want to say bad, but it's not an ideal idea. And it's just yeah, for now it's not an ideal idea. Um, I think should be scrapped for now. And I'm not saying, oh, this is a ridiculous idea or everyone who believes in this is stupid. First of all, that mentality is not healthy, and that actually makes a lot of things worse. And unfortunately, a lot of people have that sort of mentality, saying, "Oh, you have this idea, you have this opinion. Oh, you're stupid. Oh, you're like uneducated, or you're like um, I don't know, yeah, all that." It's very unhealthy. But I think this plays. If this were to pass, this goes deeper into the idea of democracy and people having a voice. And honestly, the 18-year age is good for now. Good. And um, all these things that people are proposing today that kind of expand the meaning of democracy, national popular vote, and lowering the voting age. Um, these are ideas that are spearheaded very strongly, and I wouldn't say it's worrying. It's a thing that requires a lot of thinking, and that's why we're talking about this now. Is to express what we think, and I think by now what we think about think of it is like we have reservations about it. And I know a lot of kids, well, of course, the webinar is an example, want this to happen. And I guess there's not a lot of kids. I don't know. This is a generalization, but I think we should like put this out there for anyone to everyone. But all these things, democracy is a very flawed system. Like any other system, if not used correctly, it's very flawed. But it's the best thing that we have. But I've seen a shift to a more stronger democracy, a stronger, like close to not pure, but we deviated from the ideology of our founding fathers, and
So
yeah,
more of a, I guess you could say more of a traditional form of democracy.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just this giant shift of the like a giant change of the political system, like us progressing. Progress is progress is what first of all made America like very rich, very innovative. Progress is innovation, and all of that. It applies to every aspect of our lives. But there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad about democracy, and what I'm just trying to say is that democracy, what we have now, is great. Uh, I, I just feel we're just trying to examine like the change of it. Um, I don't know. It's just what do you think of it, like Seb?
Of the system we have currently in place now.
No, basically like this giant change of
Uh,
basic. Yeah,
Okay, so basically the change we're witnessing right now.
yeah,
Well, quite frankly, I'm not against it. I should say I'm not necessarily against the change, but I'm not the biggest fan of it either because I don't know. I feel, especially with the political climate in the U.S. right now, people are more separated in a sense on party lines. You know, they're more focused on um, who shares their ideology instead of just doing it for, you know, just the betterment of themselves and the betterment of their fellow Americans. And I feel like people see it more as just being red and blue, um, Democrat and Republican, whereas opposed to the fact that we're all just Americans, and even, you know, apart from that, we're all just people. So I I'm not a big fan of people wanting to go back to a more traditional form of democracy, especially since I guess you could say, in a sense, I think people are a little more extreme, if you will, in their beliefs, and they're not really willing to, you know, listen or compromise with the other side. So that's why I believe it's important to have, you know, elected representatives, kind of like you would have in a republic or more of a representative democracy like the one we currently have now. Um, yeah, those are just my personal thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like very interesting talking about like democracy and all this, like the history of it, the philosophy of it, and it feels like honestly right now the this podcast feels like a little bit dry and like slow, and not a lot of substance, like an issue like abortion or gun rights, which we are going to talk about like in future episodes. But I guess this is more of like a philosophical thinking kind of podcast, which kind of like examining all of this, um, like taking a step back from all of these hot topic issues and try to like penetrate the history of this like idea that we've been ingrained to like cherish and see how it kind of progressed. And that I find is very interesting. I don't know about you, Seb. Uh, it's just, I think the projection of where we're going now, um, honestly, there's a lot of good things about it, benefits, um, creates like kind of like um, taking the power from the elites, and I mean at least by like business, like corporations, and bring it back to the people. We're witnessing something historic that has that is like matched with the movement of the progressive era, all these social movements too. Um, honestly, anyone on, I guess, the conservative side, uh, honestly, I think it's good. The voting age and the national popular vote, I kind of disagree on, but this is becoming more and more of a stronger movement, stronger like idea, and it's basically like I think will affect how we live, how the country will run in the next 10 to 20 years, and yeah, I think that's um, basically all like the culmination of my thoughts.
To add on to what you just said, I think you're right about that in the sense where this will most definitely affect the way we live in the next 10 to 20 years, but I think it could also last far longer than that. Uh, I think, because you look at it this way, there has been, as you know, especially from our generation, from especially what you see on social media with all of these social justice movements and whatnot, you see a lot of backlash towards conservatism as well, because conservatism in the US has been associated with, as far as people have seen it portrayed in the media, with hate and unwilling to be accepting of others and change. So I don't know. I feel like it's also going to affect the way a lot of elections play out. Uh, for most definitely, because if you do move to more of a pure or direct democracy in a sense, and let's say a majority of the country is heavily left leaning, or particularly left leaning and more progressive, you could see you know uh, the Democrats or the left in power for extended periods of history. Over the next couple decades, I don't think you'll see really many Republican lawmakers in office. But that's just my thinking with how the political climate of the country as a whole is shifting.
Yeah, I think we should really be prepared for all those ideas and opinions to like um, culminate into like this like real thing, a real law. And honestly, I don't know about you. I would definitely vote, even if I'm like right now. I would definitely vote. But like again, um, goes back to like the general like people. For me personally, idealistically, this is good. Direct elections, more voting, more voters, younger voters. This whole idea of a more direct democratic society. I think everyone, and this is my belief, this, I think everyone should like instead of like saying yes, 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 let's do this. Um, I think everyone should like take a step back and really think about the consequences of these things. First of all, electoral college. If we do a popular vote, going back to urban cities, what about the smaller cities? And one of the arguments for this national popular vote is um, the electoral college does not count one vote, one person, one vote, and that goes back because like this entire like uh, the way that like electoral votes are distributed among the states, like this is like an insanely like complicated thing that I cannot put into words, but it's like every 1,000 people, every like 100,000 people or so equals one electoral vote, but that's very different from like Wyoming and Canada, Wyoming and like California. It's very different. One vote does not equal to like one voter in that case, and that really, in the people's eyes, some people's eyes, that's not how democracy works. That's not how we work. Well, we're not. The argument against it is like, oh, we're not supposed to be a direct democracy because of the founding fathers and all that. We cover that, but also the voting age, young people are immature. They are uneducated. They're not. They didn't even graduate high school. Um, yeah, I think my main point is we have to really think about this.
Yeah,
Initiate a conversation like we're doing now. And side note, we're gonna. The reason why we want to put this on YouTube is to have like kids comment on this more directly. Um, the link will be provided on a social media platform. But going back, yeah, is to initiate this kind of sort of conversation because like I've seen the progression of this like idea direct democracy. I'm like, hey, let's talk about this. We need to talk about this because this is gonna affect us. And yeah, that's basically it.
no, yeah, you're right. This is most definitely going to, I guess you could say, affect how. This is most definitely a topic we need to continue discussing in the near future. You know, as time continues to progress and we continue to see, the, I guess you could say, more of a second rise of progressivism, you know, just as we did over a century ago. But this is definitely a topic we can revisit, and it's very interesting to see how things progress moving forward.
It's a, especially right now. It's a great day. I wouldn't say. Well, okay. Let me rephrase that a little bit. Politically, anyone who has like the ambition to like who has the ambition to like speak out and all that and like organize act and like be active and also like a person who just like likes conversation, likes debate, all likes all this fiery stuff. Because like a lot of like events in the past 4 years, 5 years, like things just happened. It's just um I think politically it's like a great like decade to explore just politics and talk about it. Um, yeah, it's just a massively like. There's so many adjectives I could have like describe this, but weird time. But yeah, basically, like that's what I just think of it.
Yeah, more or less. But we'll just have to wait and see. But times are changing, and we'll see just how the form of government that we currently have. We'll just see, um, you know, maybe 10, 15 years down the line how much things have changed, or even longer than that, how things have changed since this government was founded as we know it today. Initially with the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and the Constitution in 1789. But uh, yeah, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think we reached the end of the line here. Uh,
Mm.
yeah,
Well, Sam, it's always great speaking with you.
yeah, you too. Like
Yeah,
this is like a mind-boggling thing, but yeah, whatever. It's like yeah, good to talk
it's
to good to talk to you.
it's an exciting discussion though. We just you take a look at how this country was founded, all the major events that we've been through for the past 244 years thus far. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, I would say so.
yeah, it's from through the past 244 years. But it's very exciting and interesting to see where this takes us.
Yeah,
So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this week's episode of Hail the Pod. I'm Sebastian Rouzard. This is Sam Chang, and I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode.